markets made the decision to quit using Bitcoin altogether. And that's how this actually fueled this whole transition.
95% of Darknet markets use Monero?
Yeah.
Over Bitcoin, Bitcoin's only transacted 5% of the time?
Yeah, so
wow.
5% of the markets, right? So I mean, every period of time, you have between 10 and 15 of these markets active in parallel. And I think the overall majority right now, let it be 80, 90, 95% is using Monero. And only a handful is using Bitcoin. And then if they use Bitcoin, it's more or less alongside Monero.
Vigilantes, I'm here with Rolf. How are you?
Great. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. I just heard Crypto Bear sing, "Make crypto scary again." Let's talk about scary stuff. Let's talk about Darknet markets. What's going on in there?
Well, I think for one is that Monero is taking over the king position as the payment option there. So yeah, I think that's the main thing that also I discussed today, that Monero is taking on this more like favorite payment option on these Darknet markets. Yeah.
So tell everyone a little bit about yourself and why I asked you that question.
Yeah, sure. I'm an academic. I work in Delft, that's in the Netherlands, technical university, and my area of research is on the intersection between cryptocurrency and crime, so darknet markets or ransomware, whatnot. And I've been looking at these darknet markets for like the past 5-6 years. So I have a background in criminology and computer science, and I've been researching that intersection for quite a bit.
I'm interested in darknet markets because I feel that if the economy collapses, there's going to be a run for toilet paper, because it turns out that when communism takes over a country, for some reason people start wiping their ass with their hands. Did you know that? Did you know this?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it turns out that in the government of Venezuela actually rewards bureaucrats with toilet paper. Yeah, part of their awards, and it's documented. There's a picture. If you go on Google, you actually see it. There's like bureaucrats being given by government officials like a packet of toilet paper. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
And that sounds fascinating. And it sparks to mind that in the Netherlands, whenever the first wave of COVID was happening, so that's like nearly 2 years ago, fortunately. People started hoarding toilet paper.
Yeah, that happened all over the world.
Yeah.
I think implicitly everyone knows. I think it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction that under dictatorship or totalitarianism, the first thing that goes is hygiene for some reason.
Yeah, it's sort of like the human psyche is just weird, man. You know, hoarding toilet paper. Come on, who would have thought that?
But if you think about it, I mean, hygiene is important. That's one thing that I look forward to is if something happens, I would like to see a lot of toilet paper sellers are receiving Monero for toilet paper on darknet markets.
Could be an April 1st joke, man. I mean,
have you seen toilet paper on darknet markets?
No, I have not. But you know, I mean, the overall majority there, of course, are illegal products, right? So narcotics.
Hey, toilet paper can become illegal. I mean, the way bureaucrats think.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we already know that under their control, it becomes a scarce resource.
Oh, yeah, okay. If you look at it that way, yeah, no. But I mean, like, the overall majority of the products that are traded there are illegal, narcotics, credit card details, databases full of email records, malware toolkits, what have you not. That's all sold right there. And therefore, it makes sense that they choose at first a pseudonymous currency, right? So Bitcoin, and then after a couple of years, shifted to Monero to increase privacy and security of an online environment where illegal stuff is traded, and that makes sense.
What are what would you say, top 5 or 3 things that you've discovered in your research that maybe shocked you?
Well, I mean, in the first years, I was surprised by, the amount of products and services that were traded there. I mean, it's like whatever you think not to find, like wholesale quantities of drugs, all sorts of toolkits for ransomware attacks, stuff like this you can find there. That was really surprising to me. Second, everything is anonymous there, right? So people use pseudonyms and etc. But what surprised me is that we're still, using bitcoins, whereas we know that is not as privacy aware as other cryptocurrencies.
What is the percentage right now, would you say, Monero to Bitcoin?
I would say that there is some legacy. Maybe 5% of these markets still use Bitcoin, but 95% is Monero.
Already? I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. So and then there's a differentiation between Monero only, so marketplaces that have shifted completely to Monero, and then marketplaces who are sort of like still on the fence, accepting Monero next to Bitcoins. But there are not a lot of those still in existence, and marketplaces that run on Bitcoin completely. I know just a handful of examples, and those are, I would say, legacy. They're fading out, and everything that is new is Monero only. Yeah.
What else have you discovered from your research that is something that we wouldn't know, or people wouldn't know, or wouldn't expect?
This whole transition didn't happen because people on these markets, so that the actors that are selling, right, vendors and buyers, it was not because they wished to transit or to pivot to Monero. Because what we figured out is that buyers, right, so people looking for goods and services to acquire, they were not as happy as that you expect buying stuff in Monero. Why was that? Well, simply because we're talking, 2016, 2017, and it's not that easy to buy something with Monero than it is with Bitcoins. So these buyers were sort of like dragging their feet, and therefore were sort of like not making way to this change that is happening right now. While on the other hand, these vendors, right, so people who are selling, were very much looking forward to receiving stuff in Monero because it's more secure, they have more feeling of privacy, it gets at least an advantage to not being attributed by law enforcement, etc., etc. These customers still ruled because, if one vendor would shift to Monero, buyers would just go to another vendor who would still accept Bitcoin, and they will all flock there, right? So it's also a bit of a business argument to still keep accepting Bitcoins. So what did they do in the end is that these market administrators, the people running these markets, made the decision to quit using Bitcoin altogether. And that's how this actually fueled this whole transition.
95% of Darknet markets use Monero?
Yeah.
Over Bitcoin, Bitcoin's only transacted 5% of the time?
Yeah, so
wow.
5% of the markets, right? So I mean, every period of time, you have between 10 and 15 of these markets active in parallel. And I think the overall majority right now, let it be 80, 90, 95% is using Monero, and only a handful is using Bitcoin. And then if they use Bitcoin, it's more or less alongside Monero.
How has your research been taken by the faculty around you and law enforcement and people? Like, what has been the response?
Well, I bring facts, right? So you can't dispute facts, and of course, law enforcement was very happy, if you can say it like this, with these actors using Bitcoins, because that's to a certain extent very well traceable, making it a very much I would say loved object for them to follow. But I mean, now that they see a shift to Monero, that brings about new challenges. But you can talk a lot about those challenges being out there, but you can bum about that. But in the end, you have to of course handle the challenge. And I mean, like the faculty or people around me are also not surprised, and maybe even a bit sort of like spark interest in this area of research too, because a lot of cryptocurrency researchers are not per se looking at this crime angle. And I think when technologies are invented, they intend to be neutral, but sometimes they're used for legitimate purposes, and that means that we should not close our eyes for those too.
Yeah, 100%. If I were managing a family office like portfolio, I would not want to be managing it in transparent surveillance coins, because it would invite financial voyeurism. I don't want people knowing my secret sauce as to how I invest the funds I'm under, that I have under management. So yeah, Monero and privacy funds would be what I would go for personally.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. And I think that there are all sorts of legitimate purposes why to shield certain financial information from others, and Monero is one way to do that. And next to these legitimate purposes, there are illegitimate purposes who have the exact same reasoning, shielding information from what you call voyeurism. I mean, that's for criminal actors the same as for a family, right?
Yeah, I mean, these are just tools, and tools could be used for good or evil, and that's something that I think everyone needs to understand. And it's almost like the gun control argument. It's the same. These are just tools that could be used for good or evil. So, where do you foresee the law going after your research?
Yeah, well, I think regulation is a complex endeavor with privacy coins, simply because regulation starts from the perspective of that you essentially are able to get to know who is using a currency for what, right? That's how regulation comes to be, right? The companies that handle these currencies are able to figure out who is behind certain transactions, who owns a certain amount of value, etc. And for a privacy coin, that of course is intrinsically different, because the whole purpose is that is not something to find out easily. So the only way I see how regulation can be effectively employed is that you have a certain amount of reliance on the users themselves, that they need to bring in their view keys or whatnot with exchanges, because otherwise an exchange cannot verify where these funds are coming from or who you are. And yeah, and if you are not able or willing to do that, that means regulation will fail.
For those watching, if you're not familiar with a view key is the ability to have optional disclosure using Monero. Can you please expound on that a little, please?
Yeah, no, sure. This is also how far my knowledge goes, right? So I'm not an in-depth expert into the Monero ecosystem, but I mean, the view key would allow other parties to see where certain funds are coming from, and would then, in theory, fulfill their regulatory options.
It's almost like there is going to be a lot of negative press, and I already see it coming, where they're only going to focus on what's convenient to the establishment, which is to see real cryptocurrency like Monero, privacy coins, as something nefarious only used by criminals. You know that's coming. What's your response to that?
Well, you shouldn't conclude something about the entire use of Monero by looking at only one use case, right? So my work sheds light onto how Darknet markets are using Monero, and it turns out that the overall majority, nearly everyone, is using Monero as a means of payment. But it doesn't mean that you should confuse the fact that they are nearly all using Monero with nearly all Monero users are nefarious, right? That's the other way around. So you should investigate broader than only looking into Darknet markets, which I'm doing. So I invite people to do that, to see how Monero is used in other applications.
It's one thing, guys. That this is all. We live in a world right now of information warfare, and if you're watching this and you care about these topics, it's important for you to be very well aware and to spread the message of honesty and truth, because that's really why we're here. Will there be bad people using any chairs? Yes, there's going to be bad people that use chairs and hurt people with chairs, but there's also positive use cases for chairs as well, like anything in life. So it's again, this is going to be a battle of information, and overall, people will use the best medium of exchange possible in the market. Right now, there's a big push by the Cuban community in exile to spread Monero adoption in Cuba. That in itself would be like a real physical darknet market, a dark market, you know, that is freeing people from the tyrannical control of the communist regime. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that there are a lot of stories about countries using any cryptocurrency, Monero included, as either legal tender or as some other form of payment or as a means of exchange. So I am not surprised that people are seeking ways to change the financial status quo. Similar to what is happening right now with the sanctions in place, right, against Russian oligarchs and other people on the sanction list from Russian origin. That's allegedly, I have not investigated, so I don't know, but allegedly now turned to cryptocurrencies to evade sanctions, right?
Yeah, they're actually, there's a way now for chain analysis to cross-reference people from places that have been sanctioned.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing, and I mean that also tells you that the industry is very keen.
I mean, you're saying it's a good thing that it exists?
No, I mean it's a good thing that companies like Chainalysis and other cryptocurrency analytic firms are pooling resources into making sure that the capabilities that they have are used to make sure that these sanctions are not circumvented by using an alternative forms of payment. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I mean, like these sanctions are not there without any reason. They're there for a very good reason. So if the traditional financial system is unable to make a dent into the cryptocurrency use, and they are, which means it makes sense, then of course these companies, if they pick up the helm and say, hey, we'll do our best to make sure that sanctions are not evaded, I applaud that.
Yeah, well, it goes to show that these transparent surveillance coins are not censorship resistant.
Yeah, that's the other side of the coin. I mean, our Russian oligarchs are now turning to Monero because if they use Bitcoin, they can still be sanctioned, or they still follow the sanctions. That might be. I don't know. I'm not a Russian oligarch. You shouldn't ask me. But I mean, it at least shows that the cryptocurrency industry is also interested in making sure that their image is not negatively influenced by anecdotal evidence of nefarious use.
Yeah, well, we don't care for sanctions, or honestly, I don't care for sanctions or anything that censors anyone. And I mean, but obviously, it's very important to describe things as they are, and that's the truth is that we live in a world where there's going to be people that want to control other people. And the fact that transparent surveillance coins like Bitcoin open yourself up to mass surveillance and for you to be censored or sanctioned out of trade and voluntary cooperation. This is just wild that we're starting to see a true divide in crypto. And would you say that Bitcoin and Monero can coexist within the same plane? Or do you think that they're going to be completely serving different market sectors?
I think right now they are both serving the same public as a different audience. I mean, if you look at these darknet markets, they're totally different than, of course, people mainstream that are using Bitcoin for whatever legitimate purposes, right? But I mean, in the end, I think, of course, where Monero is accepted and where Bitcoin is accepted determines to a certain extent, compared to the economies of scale and to the network effect, etc., all sorts of more economical incentives, that determines wherefore Bitcoin and Monero is used. But right now, I think, yeah, there is a clear distinction between people who use Monero and people who use Bitcoin. And that differs on the purposes they use it for.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for your time, Rolf. It was great talking to you. And where can people read and find out about your research?
Yeah, so if you go onto the Monerotopia website, it links to my personal website, and there you can find all the stuff that you might want to figure out about the work I've been doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being with us. And yeah, guys, keep learning, keep studying, because this is interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary. It's something that it's just going to be part of everyone's life. And I want to ask you one last question, because it seems to me like in academia in general, people have this bias to think, oh, my field of study is more important than your field of study. Are you noticing that maybe now there's more like dialogue between different faculties?
Well, I can't speak for every faculty, but I mean, like, at least to my knowledge, I think a lot of people realize that indeed their field is not the only perspective there is out there, and that, for instance, vast amounts of data are collected on darknet markets, for instance, to be analyzed from different perspectives, be it more like social scientific, be it more like cybersecurity related stuff. So yeah, I do see that people are collaborating more, and I think that's a good thing, because in the end, like you just said, you gotta keep learning, and the best way to do that is to learn from one another, across disciplines. So yeah,
it's very humbling. It's very humbling because the cryptocurrency, Monero specifically, is something that the world in general cannot avoid. This is going to keep growing. There's no stopping it. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
What up, Vigilantes? I am on my way to go speak to the business association of this whole area of Acapulco, called Bonefield, where we have Anarchapulco. We're gonna set them up with crypto. So all these people, all these businesses are gonna become merchants, crypto merchants. So very excited about that. I'm actually walking there right now. So at the end of Anarchapulco, I felt compelled to give a workshop. And it was really two workshops in one. One, it was on the topic of AI and how to respond to it as the crypto community. And we gifted you guys the tools, so open source, so you can learn more about how to respond to AI using proof of work. And the second topic of the conversation is how can we onboard up hundreds of millions of users overnight into the crypto space? And that has already been solved. So go to this description. This information needs to get out. In my opinion, is probably the two most pressing issues of our time that are really, come down to just one issue. We need to reach hyper cryptodization before AI takes over. And we have the tools. So we really want you guys to click in the description and watch this workshop. I did it at the end of Anarchapulco. After everything was done, I just felt compelled. I felt called to do it. In my opinion, it's the most badass workshop that I've ever given, because it has to do with what is, in my opinion, the two biggest issues in our time: AI and fixing the crypto onboarding problem. Both wrapped in one. You guys gotta watch it. I can't stress enough how important this workshop is. We're giving it away for free. So just sign up below, watch the workshop. This actually was a 3.5-hour workshop, and we broke it down to, there goes a puppy. And it broke down to after editing, it was like an hour and 30 minutes. So we trimmed the fat for you, and I hope you enjoy it. Peace, love, anarchy. Bye.